Hey, what's up, garden friends? How's everybody doing? I hope you're good. I am great. Talk about the ZZ plant. The ZZ plant, also the Zamioculcas Zamiifolia. You can see it. It's right there. ZZ plant. I love when it's written out there on the tag because then I don't need to put it on the screen, although I probably will just out of habit. I'll put it down right there. These are a super common, crazy easy to grow houseplant. I need to repot this guy that I picked up. I'm not going to pot it up into anything too large, but I'll get into that towards the end of the video, probably the middle of the video. First, I want to talk about the care, why it's such a good plant to have around. I'll go over more of that as I'm repotting it because there are some things that I want to be able to show everybody and talk about. The ZZ plant. This plant, the ZZ plant, is a very easy to grow, like I've already said, repeating myself, houseplant with very nice dark green and super shiny foliage. Mine's a little bit dusty, need to clean that off. That is important to the care of plants, keep the leaves free of dust so that they can photosynthesize properly. Before I even really get too far into the video, I do want to go ahead and mention this is a toxic plant, not safe for pets or children, humans that is. It's one that you want to be careful with. When I repot this, I need to make sure I go grab some gloves actually. If you have a ZZ plant and you've been handling it, you ever notice any type of burning sensation, numbness anywhere with your lips, eyes, whatnot, then you need to seek medical attention immediately. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, they are insanely easy to grow. ZZ plants don't like a lot of light. They do not like a lot of water. You can fertilize them. I would say monthly would be ample. And it's just, they just kind of do their own thing. They have a moderate to slow growth rate. I've noticed them to grow a little bit faster, but they're usually regarded as being a very slow grower. But not, I mean, this one right here, I've only had this guy in here for a few days. It already has a whole nother frond starting to pop up there. That's not very slow. It's hard to find plants that really don't need a lot of light or a lot of water, and this is one of them. I mean, they need some light. You don't want to put them in just like a pitch black room, but you can put them someplace if you have a room, like the north side of the house, northeast side of the house where there's not a lot of sun coming through. This is a good plant to have in there. Like I mentioned, they do not like to be watered very heavily at all. This one is actually bone dry. I need to repot this, which I'm going to go ahead and do. Typically, I would water a plant before I repot it. I don't want the plant to have any type of stress going on at all when I repot it. You can see here, this guy, this ZZ plant, the soil it's in is very peaty, which holds on to moisture for a really long time. I don't want it in that, and I think it's going to flake out a little bit easier while it's dry. And they're tough plants, so I'm not really too worried about disturbing it too much while it's dry. No, but on the note of watering, water these guys when they're dry. It's not like a lot of other house plants where it's like, oh, just make sure the top inch of soil is dry. Go ahead and just let it dry out. These have a mechanism that I'll talk more about as I unpot it and repot it. A characteristic that lets them go bone dry and still survive with it. Now, not forever, obviously, but do make sure that it's dry before you give it a heavy watering. You want that water to run through the pot very, very quickly, right out that bottom. Sharp, sharp, sharp drainage is always very important. I know that was kind of brief as far as the care goes, but that really is all there is to it. So I'm going to go ahead and get this guy repotted. I have this wooden planter here. I picked this up from IKEA, I think actually last winter, and I hadn't potted anything up in it. I had two of these. I planted one up with some cactus and succulents. That video is on the channel somewhere. I don't know. I'll link it below if you're interested. It was a little succulent garden. But seeing as how these are wood, they're very flimsy, cheap wood too, I don't want to put anything in this that is going to want water frequently because it's wood, it'll rot. Even with that plastic tray in the bottom, I really should actually probably line the whole thing with plastic. Here's the deal though, I'm not going to be keeping this potted up in this for too terribly long. This is just kind of to get me through the winter months. I don't want to look at it in its nursery pot. I kind of want to get out of that peat-based soil as well. So I thought this would be a good option for that. So I went ahead, took my drill, popped a hole in the bottom. Actually, I popped several holes in the bottom to allow that to drain more freely. But like I said, it's not going to be watered super heavily and very frequently at that. So I thought that this would be a good option for this wooden pot. This isn't fake. That's real wood. It's cheap wood too, so I don't expect it to hold up to a lot of moisture. Starters, need to get this guy out of its pot. Or girl, or them, non-binary, whatever she wants or he wants or it wants to be. I don't know. You know what I'm saying. I'm gonna go ahead and unpot this guy. And the deal with the gloves is that these produce a sap that can be irritating. Their toxicity is usually hyped up to an extreme. It's not something that I worry about that much. Not too long ago, probably 8 or 9 years ago, a lot of people were claiming that like even touching these guys was really bad for you. And that's really not the case. You don't want to ingest it. And obviously you don't want to get that sap on you either. Now, I can tell this guy needs a repotting because one, well, the pot, I don't really know how it's going to show on camera, but it does have kind of an oblong shape to it. And that's because the tubers that are in here have really started to push their way through. So I'm going to go ahead, lift this guy out, and have a good look at those roots and a good glimpse at the tubers as well. And I should lift out of here fairly easily. Yeah, look at that. Very, very, very full of roots. Not overly pot bound, but it's not going to hurt to repot it, that's for sure. Coming through here, loosening up that soil, letting that fall out of there. I did also want to mention, I noticed that tag throughout the entire video. This guy right here has said medium light on it this whole time. I was talking about low light. You can grow it in either one. It's obviously going to grow much slower. You'll want to water it much less frequently in low light. Really, if it were outdoors, this would be one that you would give morning sun to and then dappled light throughout the rest of the day, making it a good understory plant. Hardy zone's 910 up there, so if you live north of that, cooler than that, then you want this as a house plant. Yeah, see these tubers? I mean, look at that. These things are absolutely massive. And this is not a very big plant at all. They're easy to divide. Because of these tubers, you can go through and cut them and split them up to propagate them. You can also propagate them through leaf cuttings as well. But it's these tubers, these massive, massive structures that are under here that they're growing from. That's what allows these to make such a nice house plant for people who maybe aren't great about watering their plants very often. It really adds a durability to the plant. These tubers store all types of water and nutrient for the plant. In fact, if you go too long without watering them and they start to defoliate, generally, usually, I don't want to say always, but you can go ahead and resume watering and they should resprout from those tubers. As long as these haven't fully desiccated, then they're okay. And talk about a remarkable plant, right? It's such a nice thing to have in a plant is them to have their own backup storage system. I'm not going to get all of the soil out of here. I just want to get a lot of it because it is very, very peaty. I don't want it to retain a lot of moisture, which I know I already said. I'm just going through and kind of loosening it up somewhat. I don't want to disturb the roots too much because they are dry, which means that they will crack a little bit more easily. Thing is though, with these guys, even if I did like rip out the entire root structure, they would defoliate, but then I could repot these tubers and they should take off again on their own. Obviously, I want to avoid doing that. I'm not going to do that. Don't want to stress the plant out more than you have to. And you can kind of see here, there's sort of a hair-like texture to the roots, and this, look at that spiral root coming out of the middle there. Like it's got a crazy little pigtail shooting out. So the main thing I'm doing is I just want to loosen up that root memory enough so that it doesn't continue to wrap around itself. But this is, as I think I mentioned, it's not going to be in this pot for too terribly long. I just didn't want to keep looking at it in that nursery pot and have that peaty soil in it. It's going to be a lot easier to keep alive in the winter months when temperatures are cooler and something that dries more quickly. But it is a plant that doesn't mind being somewhat root bound. The tubers on these guys are very sturdy and strong, kind of like that of these Strelitzia reginae, the orange bird of paradise, where it will burst through a pot if you go too long without repotting it. I would imagine a few more months in that black nursery pot and this would have started to really show some indentations, would have looked pretty gnarly. I can see that this fits in here very well, like just barely high enough. I'd actually prefer for that to be a little bit lower down. So I'm gonna mess with it a little bit more and then yeah, pot it up. Look at the size of this tuber. And this is a relatively small plant. I mean, in the grand scheme of these ZZ plants, it's a very small plant actually. These will get 3 to 4 feet tall and 3 to 4 feet wide. So imagine how big these tubers would be should the plant be more mature, full grown. I mean, that's really big. That's potato size. Speaking of tubers, I'm gonna go ahead and use an all-purpose cactus mix here. Nothing fancy. They don't need a soil that's particularly rich in organics. The main thing is that it drains quickly and doesn't hold on to moisture for too terribly long. I found that the ZZ plants, they really do their best when you can water them frequently and it will dry out quickly versus watering it infrequently and having that soil stay stopping wet. That's kind of the kiss of death for these guys. And by frequently, I mean like, I don't know, maybe a few times a month, if even. That really is going to vary from house to house, climate to climate, how quickly the soil is going to dry out. But since I like to make sure that they dry out pretty much all the way. I mean, I can never really tell what's happening in the very bottom of the pot as far as the moisture goes. You can keep a wooden skewer in the soil and pull that up, and you can see the color variation between the wet and the dry. It's one way to do it. I think that's kind of overkill for these. You don't really need to do that. Just don't overwater it. That's the theme I'm trying to drive home here. And now I'm going through and just kind of working the soil into the gaps, adjusting the plant a little bit back and forth to let that soil down in there. And it's pretty much done, actually. This tuber's sticking up a little bit. They can stick up a smidge, and that's okay. In fact, if you're a heavy-handed waterer, maybe you live someplace extremely humid where you know that it's just not going to dry out very quickly, having them stick up just a very, very small amount, that can be kind of a like backup, sort of a fail-safe, but it's really not necessary. I prefer for them to be covered. You can kind of see the white here where those were under the soil before, so that's where I want to bring the soil line up to. I have some of these white marble chips, just some things I picked up from the Home Depot. I'm going to go ahead and use these to top dress the plant, which is not always the best thing to do with plants that don't like much moisture, because it can kind of hold that moisture in a little bit. But it can also help them when it comes to keeping moist soil from causing rot around the stems. It kind of provides a barrier. I'm just doing it because I think it looks pretty. I think it helps finish things off, and it looks nice. So just have to be a little bit more careful to make sure things dry out properly. There we go. That's all top dressed and pretty. I would have actually preferred to use a darker stone, but the white marble's all I had, so I just kind of went with it. I just didn't want to look at the soil, not in that pot. But if I come across something darker, like a Mexican beach pebble, something like that, I think that would look a lot nicer than the white marble in here. But I don't hate it. It still works. And then, of course, the last step here anytime repotting a plant is to water it. I don't, since this is a wooden pot, I don't want to water it and have it sit in the water, so I need to find something for it to sit on. I'm not sure. I'm going to poke around and see what I can find. Just going to kind of have to improvise. That might be kind of bougie, but it works. At least it's not going to actually be sitting in the water when it comes down here. That's really all I care about. Want that water to move through the soil quickly. Oftentimes when I'm using a commercial cactus mix or succulent mix, I'll add perlite, extra sand, some orchid bark, lava rock, anything to it that I can to help it drain a little bit more quickly. I didn't really think I needed to do that in this case. This isn't like a desert cactus where if it's wet for more than a day, it's just immediately going to rot. They're not that sensitive. More like a days on end sort of thing. And as always, I put the stone in before I watered it in. Water the plants in first. That's just a tip, because then you can see where the soil's settling. Top that off if necessary, and then it won't flow up and dirty the gravel quite as much. This is also how I'm doing things so I can check the drainage, so I can monitor it and make sure that the water is really coming out of there, not sitting in that plastic dish that you could see in the beginning that was lining the bottom of the pot. Here we go. That is watered in very thoroughly. The water's coming out the bottom of the pot nice and fast, just like I want. So now I'll probably leave it there overnight, really, just because that extra exposure, having it lifted up a little bit, will let it dry out a little bit more quickly. But I do think that does look much nicer than being in the nursery pot, even if it is sitting on top of that candle holder. It's a pretty candle holder. I'm not going to hate it. It looks fine. Yeah, there it is. ZZ plant. Super awesome, easy house plants that really, you just can't go wrong with it, because they're so easy to grow. Usually when I talk to people who are having any types of struggles with the ZZ plant, it normally ends up being that they're being watered too much, or they've been sitting in too much sun, and there'll be like some bleaching or something like that, photooxidation within the foliage. Like I said, not a full sun plant, more of an understory plant. Morning sun's okay, dappled throughout the rest of the day. That's all they need. Anything more than that can really scorch the foliage up. As far as pests are concerned, there really aren't too many you have to worry about. When they're in a smaller size, one thing that's nice is you can just take them into like your shower or into your sink, wash the bugs off, keep a horticultural oil handy to treat in between. Anytime I see a foliage like this, I for some reason assume the plant's going to be prone to spider mites, especially when they don't need a ton of humidity or air circulation. Then that's an area that spider mites will thrive in. Yellowing is usually an indication of too much water. Now this one came with this yellow piece on it, and I went ahead and left it so I could talk about it. I'm not surprised by this at all about it having this yellow growth in here. And that's because, I mean, you just saw the peaty mixture that this came out of, so that doesn't surprise me one bit. And I actually, see, that'll just pluck right out. Careful to not touch the end of that. I don't want any of the sap, any of the juices getting on me. It could be an irritant to the eyes and the mouth, and different sensitivities can be bad, so it's just something to avoid. But yeah, that yellowing, that's usually how you know. It has not been 31 minutes. Why is my timer going off? It's been like 11 minutes. That's weird. Have a casserole in the oven, sorry. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all there is to it. It's an easy plant. Try it out. If you killed it before, give it another shot. They're very fun and easy. What are some of your experiences with the ZZ plant? Hit me up on Instagram at Tropical Plant Party. I have all my social media linked down below, down there in the description of the video. Follow me and I'll follow you back. It's a good way to get a hold of me. It's a fun place to see everybody's plants and kind of nerd out together. Or just comment down below, get a conversation going. There are always fun tips and tricks people have with their houseplants, so let me know some of yours. And don't forget to leave the video a thumbs up. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Lets me know things are going well over here, so thank you. I notice it and I do appreciate it. And subscribe as well. I upload multiple times a week, so don't forget to hit that notification bell. That way you know when new videos come out. I'm actually really liking the way this looks. I mean, not so much in the drainage dish, but the wooded planter with that works well. I think that'll go over well. I'm gonna see if I can find a bigger one to move it up to when it gets more into active growth, when I have it outside and the temperatures are warmer. Hey, I hope everybody's doing well. And as always, and most importantly, everybody, keep on growing. Bye bye.